My name is Nuno Correia. I'm an audiovisual artist and also researcher. I've been doing research on audiovisuals for quite a bit. I followed kind of an academic career in parallel to my artistic career. I've done a lot of AV work under the name VideoJack with my colleague André Carrilho, and lately more on a collaborative way with different audiovisual artists and performers. I did my PhD on my own artistic work as VideoJack back in Helsinki, in Media Lab Helsinki. And for the past 2 years I've been doing my postdoc at Goldsmiths here in London. And I've been engaging with a community of audiovisual artists from VJ London to Video Hackspace, Music Hackspace, etc. To kind of create tools together and to learn from that. So one thread of my research, I'll start with that, and then I'll go to the main project I'm presenting here. For approximately 1 year, we were doing workshops and hackathons with different artists. So in the beginning, actually, I ran a series of interviews with 12 audiovisual artists, from Paul Prudence to Chris, who's standing there, Simon Catan, many audiovisual artists in kind of the David Quagliola, a big number of audiovisual artists in the London community to understand what were their practices and their needs, what kind of tools they use, what kind of tools they would like to use. And starting from that, we did things like a sketching workshop. I'm going to show you. So for example, in October 2014, we did a sketching exercise to sketch new tools for audiovisual performance. First based on random generation of ideas. And based on a few random ideas, we would pick the best ones and we would create sketches of audiovisual tools. So the idea of generative audiovisuals came through and through in the interviews and also these sketches. After the random generation of ideas, we did a more focused generation, and these 5 concepts that will appear here very quickly came out of that. So a lot of ideas about conveying the interface, about audience participation, using gestural interfaces and multi-touch surfaces. All this came out in this sketching exercise. After that, we wanted to go beyond sketching and actually into building stuff. So in December 2014, we had a hackathon at Goldsmiths, and then we presented the results, the 5 audiovisual projects that resulted from this. We presented that at Goldsmiths in a performance. I'm going to show that quickly. So a huge variety of projects, from drawing to sound, which is this example here, to combining particle systems with drum synthesis, which is the next example. But all kind of using an abstract language and kind of algorithmical functions or drawing functions to create sound and image. In here, for example, the idea of combining interface with graphics becomes more apparent. You actually see the process of building stuff. And yeah, this project was built in openFrameworks. So these were all projects built in 2-3 days. We had two days hackathon with a 1-day extension for some of the projects. So. This was done by Reti, who's sitting there somewhere, I think. Well, this she was. She's in the back there. And this uses processing and max MSP, so OSC communication with max MSP. And it's based on a kind of a drawing, also gestural interface. And this one was by Nuno Correia, and it's a kind of FM synthesizer. You add points, you kind of add operators, and do the same. And then you can manipulate in 2D or 3D this drawing. And we continued with this exploration. We did another hackathon. This was at the Music Hack Space in July. More variety of projects. This one was built with Unity. It doesn't look like it. This is 3D, and you can enter the 3D world, which has this a bit analog video kind of look. They use some special lens simulation technique to achieve this. But there's more stuff done in processing, like this project. More projects combining user interface with visuals. For example, here you have 4 XY paths, which are the 4 quadrants of the screen. And by moving these things around, you manipulate 4 loops, and you have 4 visualizers in the center. Again, this is the same project from Jenny V1 from the first hackathon, but here using link motion to navigate in the 3D space instead of a pointer. And you have these 2 cursors. And again, another project by Ireti and Giulio Moro. This is Residuum. One interesting thing I found about Jenny V2 is that, well, we learned some things about Jenny V1, so we tried to keep the hackathon more condensed and more focused. I think one interesting point of the Jenny V2 projects from this hackathon is that many of them have been shown in festivals, or some of them have been shown in festivals outside of our small hackathon world. So it goes to show that I think the ideas we kind of planted here have been growing and become something bigger than a hackathon and going out into the world. All this stuff from the hackathon is in our GitHub. We have a GitHub organization called AVUIs. And, well, all this stuff, I think if I leave you one link, I could leave you my own website, which is also in the program, in the festival program. So my name is Nuno Correia, and my website is nunocorreia.com. And all this stuff that I'm showing you is linked from here. So I just showed you the GenAV project, which is this workshops and hackathons project for tools for audiovisual performance. And the GitHub is you can find it in this, which is the main project I'm going to show you, is OVX AVUI. And you will find it within the, so on GitHub we have an organization called AVUIs, which basically explores the idea of generative audiovisuals and combining user interfaces with generative audiovisuals. So all the projects from the hackathons are here. You can download them, you can look at the code, you can change the code, you can do whatever. And also, I myself try to gather lessons from the hackathons and the workshops and try to produce my own interface out of these lessons, okay? So what we did, all these projects from GenAV, which you see here, they were, well, not all, but most of them, they were evaluated by audiovisual artists, so we gave the projects back to the audiovisual artists we interviewed to begin with, and asked them some questions. We interviewed, we asked them what they liked about these projects, what they didn't like about these projects, what suggestions they have, how they could make it better, how it could be made usable for themselves to use. And one of the outcomes of that research was this project called AVZones. I'm going to show you a little video. So some of the ideas that you saw in the videos I showed you were kind of applied to this prototype. So This is AVZones. It's also on the GitHub. You can download. You can install it on an iOS device if you want. Basically, it runs openFrameworks, or it's built with openFrameworks and an audio library called Maximilian. So Maximilian is an add-on for well, it is a library that has been ported also to openFrameworks, and it's built by a colleague of mine and his team at Goldsmiths. And I find it very portable in a sense that it's multi-platform. There's many audio libraries for openFrameworks. I find this one, it's very basic and low level, but because of that, you can easily port it to other platforms. So here we have AVZones basically uses, I'm gonna freeze it here. It uses a metaphor of zones, which I call a zone one of these columns, and each zone has a sound and a visualization. So here I have 3 sounds playing, right? And each zone is composed of 3 XY pads. And for example, here I have delay, here I have pitch shifting and loop playing, and here I have filter. And as you tap or drag, you change the parameters of the filters or of the loop playing. There's also a few more tricks. So you can these circles and these lines indicate that there's a looper. So the looper records my gestures. I can activate a kind of a recorder to record and loop my gestures. So I don't have to be tapping all the time. If I find a good sequence to play back, I can just record it and keep looping it. Also, there's a menu system that allows you to load more sounds and change the sounds. You can load your own sounds here. But I would say that AVZones is still in a prototype stage. I would love to be able to release it in the App Store during the summer. I hope to be able to do that. So there's really a line of research here that goes from the initial interviews to audiovisual artists, then to kind of community building of tools with artists as well, and then trying to gather my own interpretation of the results into a prototype. But then I didn't want it to stay in a prototype stage or in a rigid, because this is kind of a rigid interpretation. So the visualizations are kind of what they are. You cannot change them. You cannot change how things look. If you don't like XY pads, you cannot do much about it because the whole logic is around that. But what if you could actually open this thing up and make it very flexible, that instead of only 4 loops, you could have 10 loops or just 2 loops. And instead of XY pads, you could have any UI you wanted, any visualization you wanted, but using the same paradigm of combining user interface with visualization. So then we built an add-on for openFrameworks called AVUI. So I'm going to show you a video of that. So this is online. If you go to, well, you can go there multiple ways. You can go there either through my website and go to AVUI, but it's live in, if you use openFrameworks, you're probably familiar with this website. It's the avxaddons.com website where all the add-ons for openFrameworks are listed. And if you go to the GUI category, you have AVUI. And basically, it uses the same logic of, or it opens up the logic of AVZones that I showed you, but all these zones can be transformed into anything you want. You can design something completely different. So you have XY pads, you have faders or sliders, you have range sliders. For example, here you can set a minimum and a maximum. You have toggles, you have buttons. So the usual UI elements you would find in something like TouchOSC or whatever. Here comes pre-packaged with an audio engine and a visuals engine. And you can define how big it is, the colors, what kind of visualization you want. with the library come many different visualizations. I'm going to show them to you. Many audio effects, but also templates for you to create more audio effects, more visualizations, etc. And you can also skin the UI however you want it to. So I'll just demo a little bit, or run the video a little bit. So the sounds are not meant to be terribly inspiring, because all these are kind of templates, right? You also, any parameter, so I have this crosshair there just to exemplify that any parameter from the UI can be mapped to anything else on the screen. So you can have a background color changing, or some icon moving around, whatever you want. So anything can be using of parameter, which is a standard in openFrameworks. You can map any range inside the UI to anything outside the UI in the screen. After we built the add-on, we ran another hackathon with our audiovisual. We sent out a call. We are active with VJ London. We put our calls in the web page with video hackspace, with music hackspace. We had a call out to ask people to play with the add-on a bit and try to think what kind of things they would come out. So we had a one-day hackathon, and participants came out with very interesting ideas, which we then reincorporated into the add-on as examples, and we expanded the add-on. So, for example, one of the participants wanted to have siphon output of these visualizations, which we now have. So another participant wanted to have a Lissajous curve representation or a grid visualization, and we came up with examples of both. So in a couple of hours, this guy made a completely different visuals for of AVUI. It's really simple to change. I'm going to show you the code briefly just after. So another participant built very quickly a step sequencer and coupled it with a gesture recorder. And another one implemented FFT analysis, which we didn't have. And all these, I mean, because everything is online, you can very easily, if you don't like this FFT implementation or FFT visualization, it's very easy to change the code and do something else. Another participant did background, so he wanted to change the background of the zone, and then his next idea was to create sound out of the visuals, but he didn't really manage that in the one day, but he managed to implement a background. You can add a background for design or aesthetic purposes to the zone. So now I would briefly show you the code.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Have you thought of making a UI for your UI? Bear with me. I mean, you said that, and I understand, you know, and I know openFrameworks, brilliant tool by the way. But you've got coders that've got to go in the code and change, basically enough, obviously, because you've done a library and all that, and it looks absolutely brilliant by the way. But how much do you think you could convert that to then being a UI of your UI, so you can
drag and drop things, yeah.
Well, you can do all this without actually typing a line of code, and then the loop is looped, really.
That's a wonderful suggestion, and that's one of the conclusions we had after the hackathon. So this is one of the things we want to do. We want to have, you know, icons for, I don't know, fader or XY pad, etc., and then just plug things together to parameters, and that's done. And you have icons for audio parameters and filters or delays or distortion or whatever, and you just plug the ins and the outs, and that's where we want to go, precisely. We would love to do that. So it's kind of a back end, a graphical back end, like in between this is exactly what we would love to do.
Yeah, I think then, I mean, it's really amazing what you're doing, I think. But if you can also add that, then obviously you're opening the doors to like non-coders to get involved and even, I don't know, get it even better.
Precisely. I totally agree with you, and that's the way we would like to go. I mean, I think there are two ways to go. There's the way to add depth in terms of the kind of power users, and then there's the way to add ease of use to people who don't want to go into the code. So I'll just go. The code is highly modular, so I'll just, for those who really want to go into the code, I'm gonna show a bit how it's built briefly. So this is a very basic example. It's a zone. We call each of these combinations of sound and visuals a zone, and it's a zone with one XY pad, one toggle, one XY pad, one toggle, right? So in here we have a sample playback, and Y is mapped to volume, and X is mapped to speed. So very slow, right? And if I toggle looping, it will loop. And here I have the filter. And just to show you how this whole thing is structured, so all of AVUI is composed basically of 3 folders: audio, visual, and UI, AVUI, right? So with the audio, we have the base classes, which are basically templates for creating new ones. And then we have 2 implementations. We have delay and filter. You can very easily create more effects if you want. The same thing with visuals. We have visual base, which is like the template. And then we have circles, bars, wave, grid, Lissajous, curves. So implementations of the template. You can very easily, in a very few minutes, you can duplicate this and create new ones. With UI is the same. We have the base, which is the template, then we have implementations, the button, the slider, range slider, toggle, XY pad. And then, for example, here is how you create a zone. So this environment in Maximilian, this is typical stuff. Maybe I change a little bit. You don't see much, I think, with this presentation. So I'm going to just boost it up quite a bit here. I think this is more legible. So these are standards. You don't need to change them. These are environmental things, usually in openFrameworks for audio and for graphics. And how do you set up a zone? Well, so you set up, in this case, I only have one zone in this example. And you just create a name for it if you want. You specify the position, XY position, the width, the background color, the foreground color, and the sound. It only works with sound loops. Now we want to add synthesis to it, but for now it's only sound loops. Then you specify what UI you want to have there. And here I specify a pad, and I tie the pad to a sound. Sorry, here I'm just naming the pad. I'm saying that if you tap on it, it's a trigger, it plays. If you toggle it, it loops. And I specify that X is pitch and that Y is volume. And then I add it. Okay, then I add it to the canvas, let's say, with a certain height. I don't need to specify the width because the width is specified by the zone itself. And it just fits there. And then I add a toggle, and I specify that the toggle triggers the loop, and I add it, and I specify the height. And then I want a pad, and the pad will be to trigger and toggle the filter, and X will be frequency, and Y will be resonance of the filter, and the height is 200. And then I have a toggle that will just toggle the filter, and the height will be 100. So I specify the UI. If I want to have audio effects, I just say the filter 1, which is what I create a filter 1, which has a filter toggle. It's going to be true by default. And the X is frequency. It goes in this range, 200 to 200, 200 to 20,000. And the default is 200. And resonance. Resonance goes from 0 to 100. Everything is commented here, so you know what what kind of values to add there. So once you define the UI, once you define the audio, then you define what visuals you want there. And in this case, I have visual wave, but it could be a different kind of visual. And then you just add it there. Having done that, this is a default end of my setup, which is just start sound. And there's not much else. The rest of the stuff is Maximilian stuff. You don't need to worry about it. They are defaults. But so with this code here, we're doing zone setup, zone UI, audio effects, and visuals. We run this thing. So you can easily create an app or whatever which combines multiple zones and add different visuals and different sounds to it and map it however you want to audio parameters or audio effects. It's still in very early stages. I would be very happy to hear your ideas about it and your suggestions. We've heard already one great suggestion about how to make it easier to create these things instead of using code, using graphical elements to build this. But if you have any other suggestion or idea, I'll be very happy to hear our comments.
Any more questions for Nuno before we move on? Anyone got any burning questions? No. I think you've satisfied their desires for the.
Well, I'll be around, so if you have any questions
Thanks a
or
lot.
comments, I'll be eager to hear.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.